5 killer retirement budgeting mistakes to avoid. They did everything right. Meet John and Susan. For 40 years, they were model savers. They religiously contributed to their 401(k), maxed out their IAS whenever they could, and even paid off their house. They had a number, a big, beautiful number they thought was their ticket to a worry-free retirement. They pictured it all. Long road trips in a new RV, lazy mornings with coffee and a newspaper, spoiling their grandkids without thinking twice. So when they finally clocked out for the last time at 65, they felt this incredible sense of pride. They'd made it. But just 2 years in, that dream started to crack. A few seemingly small budgeting mistakes, tiny fissures in their financial foundation, started to spiderweb into a massive problem. The future they had worked their whole lives for was suddenly at risk of becoming a nightmare. Believe me, this is a story I see all the time. It's what happens when a perfect plan on paper crashes into the real world. In this video, we're going to break down the 5 killer retirement budgeting mistakes John and Susan made. I will walk through their story, not to scare you, but to empower you. By seeing where they went wrong, you can build the guardrails to make sure your retirement story has a much happier ending. Because it's not just about how much money you've saved. It's about how you manage it when the paychecks stop coming. Let's start with the plan that looks so perfect. The story begins, John and Susan's perfect plan. John and Susan had a nest egg of just over $1 million, mostly tucked away in traditional 401(k)s and IAAs. They also each had a small pension, and they planned on taking Social Security at their full retirement age. On their financial advisor spreadsheet, it looked bulletproof. Their projected income, including a conservative 4% withdrawal from savings, gave them an annual budget that was about 80% of what they earned before retiring. The math worked. They felt confident, almost smug. They'd won the game. Their budget was broken down into all the logical categories: housing, utilities, food, transportation, healthcare. They even had a generous line item for discretionary spending, all the fun stuff they'd been putting off for decades. They laminated the budget summary and stuck it right on the fridge, a daily reminder of their success. The first 6 months were a dream. No more alarms, no more commutes, no more office drama. Their time was finally their own. And with all this newfound freedom, they were ready to start cashing in. This is where the first and maybe the most common mistake started to take root. Mistake 1. Overspending. Especially early in retirement. The first few years of retirement are often called the go-go years. You're healthy, you're full of energy, and your bucket list is a mile long. This was definitely true for John and Susan. They had a mantra. We've worked our whole lives for this. We deserve it. And that little phrase is one of the most dangerous justifications in retirement. First, the RV, not a small used one, a brand new top-of-the-line model with all the bells and whistles. It was a huge purchase, way more than they'd planned, but they chalked it up to a long-term investment in their own happiness. They pulled a lump sum from their IRA to cover it, wincing at the tax hit, but pushing that worry away. Then came the kitchen remodel. Susan had always wanted a chef's kitchen, and now she had time to cook. What started as just new countertops snowballed into new cabinets, new appliances, and new flooring. Another big unplanned withdrawal. Next, the kids surprised them. A big family vacation with all the grandkids. John and Susan, not wanting to seem like they couldn't swing it, insisted on paying their share, and then some, treating everyone to fancy dinners and excursions. We're making memories, they told themselves. You can't put a price on that. Now look, the RV wasn't the problem. The kitchen wasn't the problem. The real issue was the cumulative death by 1,000 cut spending. They were treating their nest egg like an endless checking account, not tracking these big one-off purchases against their budget because they felt special. But in those first 2 years, special happened almost every month. It's a classic trap for new retirees. They were spending more freely than they ever did when they were working. This early overspending is so dangerous for two reasons. First, the simple math. A 30-year retirement is a marathon, not a sprint. If you burn through too much fuel in the first few miles, you'll be left running on fumes for the next 2 or 3 decades, just as costs like healthcare are guaranteed to go up. And second, there's a much sneakier villain at play here. It's called sequence of returns risk, and it's one of the most critical concepts for any retiree to understand. The market's performance in your first few years of retirement has a huge outsized impact on whether your money will last. Imagine you retire, and the market has a few great years. Your portfolio grows even with your withdrawals, creating a cushion for future downturns. That's scenario A. But John and Susan lived scenario B. They retired, and for 2 years, the market was basically flat. It didn't crash, but it didn't grow. And during that time, they were making heavy withdrawals. They weren't just spending investment gains. They were eating into their principal. They were selling off their mutual funds to pay for the RV and the kitchen when those funds were stagnant. This permanently shrunk their capital base. So when the market did start to rise again, they had fewer shares left to benefit from that growth. It's a wound that's almost impossible to heal. So how do you avoid this catastrophic mistake? The solution: give retirement a test run. Before you quit your job, you have to test drive your budget for at least 6 months. Try to live only on your projected retirement income. Have your real paycheck go into a separate account you don't touch. This is the ultimate reality check. You'll find out fast where your estimates were off. And it's much better to discover that while you still have a full-time income. Use a structured spending plan. A simple budget isn't enough. You need clarity. A great method is the needs, wants, and wishes framework. Needs. These are your non-negotiables. Housing, food, utilities, insurance, basic health care. These have to be funded first. No question. Wants. This is the fun stuff that makes life enjoyable. Dining out, hobbies, streaming services. This needs a firm monthly or annual cap. Wishes. These are the big-ticket items. The RV, the European cruise, the kitchen, remodel. These should never come from random, panicked withdrawals from your main portfolio. Instead, they should have their own savings bucket, or you have to understand that funding a wish means cutting back on the wants for a while. Review and reconcile religiously. For the first 2 years of retirement, you have to be the Hawkeye accountant of your own life. Track everything. Use an app or a spreadsheet. At the end of each month, compare what you spent to what you budgeted. Why did you go over? This isn't about guilt. It's about gathering data. You're learning a whole new way of financial living, and you need to establish a new sustainable baseline. That takes intense focus at the start. Mistake 2. Underestimating the impact of inflation. Entering their 3rd year of retirement, John and Susan had started to dial back the big spending. But a new anxiety started creeping in. That budget that felt so comfortable now felt tight. The weekly grocery bill was higher. Filling up the gas tank was painful. Their homeowner's insurance shot up 15%. Gotcha. They hadn't really planned for inflation. They created a static budget based on their expenses at age 65. And while they knew costs would go up, they never calculated its devastating power over a 30-year retirement. They were getting robbed by the silent thief of retirement: inflation. For anyone on a relatively fixed income, inflation is a recipe for failure. There's a handy shortcut called the Rule of 72. To see how long it takes for prices to double, just divide 72 by the inflation rate. At a 3% average inflation rate, which is pretty normal, prices will double in 24 years. At a 4% average rate, prices double in just 18 years. Think about that. Over a 30-year retirement, the cost of living could easily double. The $5,000 a month that feels great today will only buy what $2,500 does in the future. John and Susan's plan was built on the fantasy that today's prices would be tomorrow's prices. Every year, their fixed pension bought a little less. Their Social Security had cost of living adjustments, which helped, but their withdrawals weren't keeping up. They were getting poorer each year and didn't even see it happening. So, how do you fight this invisible enemy? The solution: prongs. Build inflation into your budget. Your budget can't be set in stone. It has to be a dynamic plan. When you project your future expenses, assume a reasonable rate of inflation. Use a long-term average like 3% or even 4% to be safe. This means every year your spending plan needs to go up by that percentage. Yes, it means you need a bigger nest egg to start, but it's the only way to be realistic. Ignoring inflation is not a strategy, it's a hope. And hope is not a financial plan. Invest to outpace inflation. This is a huge mental hurdle for a lot of new retirees. They get spooked by the market and think the safest move is to put all their money in cash. This is a massive mistake. While you need to reduce risk, you can't eliminate it. Hiding from market risk just exposes you to the guaranteed loss of purchasing power from inflation. Your portfolio's main job in retirement is to grow faster than inflation. That's the only way to maintain your standard of living, which means you must keep a healthy allocation to growth assets like stocks. The goal isn't just to preserve your capital, it's to preserve your purchasing power. They are not the same thing. Consider inflation-protected investments. As part of your portfolio, especially the safer bond portion, you can use tools built to fight inflation. The most common are Treasury inflation-protected securities, or TIPS. These are government bonds where the principal value actually increases with inflation, which means your interest payments go up too. They won't make you rich, but they're a great defensive tool to have in your back pocket. Quick pause. If John and Susan's story is hitting a little too close to home, or if you're finding these solutions helpful, do me a quick favor and hit that like button. It's a huge help and lets me know we're on the right track. Mistake 3. Failing to plan for health care and long-term care costs. John had always been the picture of health. So in their 5th year of retirement, when he woke up with severe abdominal pain, it was a shock. The year visit turned into a battery of tests and ultimately surgery. They had Medicare, so they figured they were covered, right? Wrong. They were in for a brutal shock. They were hit with deductibles for Part A and Part B. They had co-pays for the surgery and specialist visits. And one of John's new prescriptions wasn't fully covered by their Part D plan, leaving them with a huge monthly bill. The total out-of-pocket cost? Nearly $10,000, an expense that wasn't even a line item on their neatly laminated budget. To cover it, they had to pull another large, unplanned chunk from their IRA, hurting their already weak portfolio. The experience shook them, but it got worse. A few months later, Susan's widowed mother had a fall and could no longer live on her own. She didn't need a hospital. She needed daily help with bathing, dressing, and meals. They quickly learned that this type of custodial care, long-term care, is not covered by Medicare at all. The cost of a home health aide and later assisted living was astronomical. John and Susan looked at their own future, and a chilling question hit them for the first time. What if that happens to one of us? Healthcare is the undisputed heavyweight champion of unpredictable retirement expenses. A healthy 65-year-old couple retiring today can expect to pay over $10,000 in their first year just for premiums, Medicare Part B, Part D, and a Medigap plan. Projections show that same couple could spend over $300,000 on health care over their entire retirement. And that number does not include out-of-pocket costs for dental, vision, hearing, or the big one, long-term care. The solution: treat health care like the primary expense it is. Don't just lump health care into miscellaneous. It needs its own detailed budget. Research the current year's premiums for Medicare, Part B, D, and Medigap plans in your area. That's your baseline. Then add a buffer for out-of-pocket costs. Look at your past spending, and then increase it because your needs will go up with age. Become an expert on your insurance. Medicare is complicated, and your choices have huge financial consequences. You have to understand the difference between Original Medicare, run by the government, and Medicare Advantage, run by private companies. Original Medicare plus Medigap plus Part D usually gives you the most comprehensive coverage and the freedom to see any doctor. It often has higher premiums, but can lead to lower out-of-pocket costs when you get sick. Medicare Advantage plans often have low or zero premiums and bundle in other benefits. The trade-off is you're usually stuck in a network of doctors, and your cost can be much higher if you need a lot of care. There's no single best answer, and the right choice can change. You must reevaluate your plan every single year during open enrollment. Create a plan for long-term care. This is the conversation no one wants to have, but it's the biggest financial risk most of us face. Over half of people turning 65 will need some form of long-term care. And as we saw, Medicare won't pay for it. You need a strategy. Self-funding. This only works if you're very wealthy and can comfortably afford to pay $10,000 a month or more for care without bankrupting your spouse. Traditional long-term care insurance. You pay an annual premium and the policy pays for care if you need it. It can be expensive, and you should typically look into it in your 50s or early 60s. Hybrid life LTC policies. These are life insurance policies or annuities that let you use the death benefit for long-term care while you're alive. If you never need care, your heirs get the money. It's an increasingly popular use it or lose it solution. Honestly, the specific product you choose is less important than the fact that you have a plan. Any plan. It's the only way to protect your family from this devastating reality. Mistake 4. Withdrawing too much too soon. The flawed strategy, the 1-2 punch of overspending and the healthcare shock, forced John and Susan to keep pulling from their era. They tried to justify it by clinging to the 4% rule. They'd heard you could safely take out 4% of your portfolio in your first year. Their withdrawals were closer to 5% or 6%, but they figured it was close enough. So wrong. I said, look, the 4% rule isn't a law of physics. It's a guideline based on historical data, and it has some serious flaws. More importantly, it gives you a false sense of security and totally ignores the sequence of returns risk we just talked about. Let's be crystal clear. If you withdraw 5% from your portfolio in a year, the market is up 12%, you're fine. Your portfolio still grew. But if you withdraw 5% in a year, the market is down 10%. You've actually lost 15%. The 5% you took plus the 10% market loss. When you sell off investments in a down market just to pay your bills, you're locking in those losses forever. It is the fastest way to drain your account. Because John and Susan were taking heavy withdrawals during a flat market, they were in a downward spiral without even knowing it. The math of their perfect plan was broken, and they were staring down the barrel of every retiree's worst fear: running out of money. The solution: adopt a dynamic withdrawal strategy. Ditch the fixed percentage rule and get flexible. It's often called the guardrails approach. You set a target withdrawal rate, say 4%. Then you set rules. If the market has a great year and your portfolio grows, you can give yourself a modest raise, but you cap it. If the market has a bad year and your portfolio drops, you must take a pay cut. You reduce your withdrawal for the year. This forces you to tighten your belt in down years, which is the single most powerful way to protect your principal and allow it to recover. Implement the bucket strategy. This is a brilliant way to manage your money so you can sleep at night even when the market is going crazy. You divide your money into 3 buckets. Bucket 1, cash, holds 1 to 3 years' worth of living expenses in safe, liquid accounts like a high-yield savings account. When the market is down, you live off this bucket and don't sell a thing from your investments. Bucket 2, midterm, holds another 3 to 7 years of expenses in a balanced mix of stocks and bonds. Its job is to grow moderately and be ready to refill your cash bucket. Bucket 3, long-term, holds the rest of your money, funds you won't need for 10+ years. This is invested more aggressively for long-term growth. You only sell from buckets 2 and 3 to refill bucket 1 when the market is doing well. This structure prevents you from ever being a forced seller in a down market. Stress test your plan annually. A plan that only works if everything goes perfectly isn't a plan. It's a lottery ticket. Use planning software or work with a professional to run your plan through thousands of potential scenarios. High inflation, market crashes, you name it. This shows you the weak spots in your strategy so you can fix them before it's too late. Mistake 5. Inefficient tax and distribution strategies. The silent killer. As John and Susan scrambled to figure out their shrinking portfolio, another problem they'd never even thought about was about to make everything worse. Taxes. Like most diligent savers, almost all of their money was in tax-deferred accounts, like traditional 401ks and IRAs. They got the tax break up front, but they totally forgot about the bill that comes due on the back end. Every single dollar they pulled out was going to be taxed as ordinary income. All those big withdrawals for the RV, the kitchen, and the medical bills came with a nasty tax bill. Even worse, those distributions pushed them into a higher tax bracket in retirement than they were in while working. They were paying more to the IRS on a fixed income. It felt like a cruel joke. Then came the final blow. They were getting close to age 73, when the government forces you to start taking required minimum distributions, or RMDs. The IRS was about to make them withdraw a certain percentage of their IRA balance every year, whether they needed the money or not. This forced withdrawal would create an even bigger tax bill and could even trigger higher taxes on their Social Security and spike their Medicare premiums. Their lack of tax planning had turned their savings into a tax time bomb, and the fuse was lit. The solution: create tax diversification before you buy. This is something you should start working on years before you retire. The goal is to not have all your eggs in one tax basket. You want money in 3 types of accounts. Tax-deferred. Traditional 401ks, IRA, tax-free. Roth 401ks. Roth IRAs pay taxes now, and all qualified withdrawals are 100% tax-free forever. Taxable. A standard brokerage account, you pay capital gains tax, but you have flexibility. Having all 3 gives you ultimate control in retirement. In a high-income year, you pull from your Roth. In a low-income year, you pull from your IRA. You get to manage your tax bracket every single year. Use strategic Roth conversions. If you're like John and Susan with most of your money in tax-deferred accounts, you need to learn about strategic Roth conversions. This is most powerful in the years between when you retire and when RMDs begin. In these gap years, your income is often at its lowest. You can move a portion of your traditional IRA to a Roth IRA and pay the income tax on it now at your current low rate. You're choosing to pay the tax bill on your own terms at a lower rate before the IRS forces you to. That money then grows tax-free forever, and Roth IRAs have no RMDs for you. Coordinate your withdrawal and tax strategies. A smart withdrawal plan isn't just about which investment to sell. It's about which account to sell from. You can strategically pull just enough from your traditional IRA each year to fill up a lower tax bracket before RMDs push you into a higher one. This kind of coordination can save you tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars in taxes over your retirement. So, what happened to John and Susan? Their story has a sobering but ultimately hopeful ending. Facing a dwindling portfolio and the threat of huge RMDs, They finally hired a financial planner who specialized in retirement distributions. It was a salvage operation. The RV was sold. International trips became regional road trips. They were put on a strict, detailed budget they reviewed with their advisor every quarter. They started a series of Roth conversions to shrink their future tax bills. They made it work, but their go-go years were over, replaced by the slow and steady years. They found security, but they lost a huge amount of freedom, all because of a few mistakes they could have avoided. Their story is a cautionary tale about the 5 killer mistakes you have to avoid. Overspending early on, which can permanently damage your portfolio. Underestimating inflation, the silent thief that erodes your buying power. Failing to plan for healthcare and long-term care, the biggest financial wildcard. Using a simplistic withdrawal strategy that doesn't protect you from market downturns. Ignoring taxes, which can turn your savings into a massive liability. Here's the bottom line. A great retirement isn't something you just arrive at. It's something you actively manage every single year. Your budget isn't carved in stone. It's a living plan you have to monitor and adjust. By understanding these pitfalls and using the strategies we talked about today, you can build a resilient retirement that can handle whatever life throws your way. Thanks for watching.